I'm going to apologize for the folks online right now because mine look like psychedelic zebra. So just bear with me. I'm Emily Rushton, founder of Hire Integrated. It's a recruiting firm that is based here in Utah. And I just kind of want to tell you guys my story about everything from growing up to education to why I ended up opening up Hire Integrated and it really being the best decision I ever made professionally. I would consider it a win if I planted any entrepreneur seeds in at least one person here today, and want to be really kind of open with my entrepreneur journey as it happens. So I grew up in a little small town called Cowan, Tennessee. I was just telling Whitney, it's an hour south of Nashville, 45 minutes from Chattanooga. And I had a really great upbringing in the South. We were middle class at best, probably even below, but my dad was a train engineer on the CSX Railroad, and my mom conducted sleep studies. And she had a rule that I had to move at least 2 state lines away for when I went to college. She saw a lot of my brother's older friends go to nearby college and just really enjoy the party life of school and not really take their education serious. So she said 2 state lines away. And everyone thought it was really harsh and cruel, but it ended up being a huge blessing and kind of forced me outside of my comfort zone. So I left Cowan, Tennessee, and I chose BYU, Idaho. And don't ask me why. It was really affordable. We grew up and are members of the LDS faith, and it was just an affordable school. And my brother went to BYU Hawaii. That wasn't going to be big enough for both of us. So I remember setting like the first day there in the auditorium with thousands of kids. And I looked around and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe, all these kids are here. And I was just blown away by the school. I definitely did not fit in. I became friends with the dean because I saw him quite a bit. we kind of developed a friendship. And it wasn't until I really, 2 things happened that changed my education journey. The first one is they have a really good outdoors program, and I became friends with the outdoor recreational students. And we would go to Jackson on the weekends, and I learned how to teach whitewater rafting and just became really involved in the outdoors. And I really had great friendships with all of those students. They were all majoring in recreational leadership. And my dad said, don't even think about it. So I was a business major, and that was probably the second pivotal moment of my education journey. Kim Clark had just became the dean of the school. He had transferred from the Harvard Business School, and they already had this integrated business floor. But my junior year, they said, we're going to give you some money and y'all need to start up a business. And it was awesome. That's all we did that semester is we took this money and we decided to do international candy, and we sold it. And we were one of the few portfolios that actually turned a profit. And it was cool because we had an organizational structure and we learned how to work with each other. And I was one of 2 females in my business class that year. And I'm sure it's different now because I give them a hard time about that all the time. But that's really where I was like, I love kind of the business aspect of things. So my senior year, after doing that, I went to my favorite professor and I was like, what should I do? Which is crazy, right? You go to like 16 years of school and I'm just now like, what should I do? You think I would have thought of that prior. And he gave me some advice, and bless his heart, it was really awful advice, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Bless his heart. And he's like, well, where are you going to be living? I was like, well, my fiance is in Salt Lake. He's like, well, drive around downtown Salt Lake and look at all the names on the buildings and just call them up and introduce yourself. And that is exactly what I did. I was very naive and I had no idea about job boards like LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter, and this professor didn't tell me about him either. I still really like him, but I'm going to give him a hard time if I ever see him about it. And so I was cold calling into all these organizations, telling them all about myself and trying to get a job the really hard way. And thankfully, I went to a job fair, which was much more impactful for finding a job, trust me. And I ran into a recruiter there, and he was just astounded that I was relentless and bold enough to cold call people and tell them about myself. And so he hired me as a recruiter. And it was with Robert Half International. It was a large Fortune 500 recruiting company. And I was average. I did exactly what they told me to do. I followed their metrics to the letter of the law, right? I had to make 125 cold calls, visit 12 clients, and conduct 10 interviews. And that was kind of our rotation. And just then, about 2008, 2009 was happening. And just like I didn't really know about job boards or recruiter until I was in it, that was the first time I really learned about a recession. And I had a great manager, his name was Rick, and he pulled me aside and was like, hey, Rushton, you're good, but you're not great. And if you really don't kind of bring your A game and give it all you got, company's going to be doing some restructuring, and you could lose your job. And I was newly married, had a mortgage. That's awful, having a mortgage, right? When you're young 20 and Groundhog Day, going to work every day. And I went home and I cried, and I told my husband, I was like, and we just had a really good conversation about, you got nothing to lose, give it all you got. And that's when this little spark inside of me just came to life. That's the reason why I put relentless perseverance up here, because I became really intense with my career. I called more people than I ever called. I overcame objections. I just had nothing to lose type of mentality. And that year, when the organization was doing layoffs, I made it to President's Club. I was 24, 25. I earned my first six-figure salary because of base and commission. And it really kind of opened up my eyes to, this is a great career and I love doing this. And from there, I became a chairman's club. And then what happens when you start out of 14,000 employees, when you start making those top 10, top 20 ratings, you get the attention of investors. And I got the attention of the former president of the American Staffing Association. And he said, hey, I've got the money, you've got the talent, let's open up a company together. And I went and launched this company, and we had an office in Tennessee and one in New York and here in Utah. And I was traveling at the time. And I did that for 2 years, and I did everything. When you are a new business owner, if the copier is broken, you fix it. If you need business cards, you order it. You don't have anyone what it feels like to help you out. So I was kind of really involved in everything. And we were going to acquire this company, and it didn't work out. And I became really good friends with the founder. And so I made a strategic move in my career to leave this small organization that we were trying to get off the ground. And I joined a regional recruiting company. And you may have overheard some of you when I was talking to Whitney, but that was a great experience because we worked with a lot of regional companies. And one of those was Netflix, that I got great exposure to Patty McCord and the cultural deck, and we hired thousands of people for them that year. We built over $4 million with them in 1 year there at Netflix, and it was a really incredible experience. So I was going down this recruiting career where I had done the really large experience at Robert Half, a publicly traded company. I had done the really small experience where I had launched my own company, and then I had joined a regional company. And now to the timeline, this brings us to, let's see, 2018. And I actually did want to have this little guy, even though it said life had other plans, but it took me well over 10 plus years to have this little guy. And when he came, he needed a lot of help and attention. He was small. He was 3 pounds and 14 ounces, and he had to have open heart surgery. And I just knew that I needed to, just like I had given my career every single thing throughout my, the previous 15 years, I needed to give this guy every single ounce of my attention. So I stepped back from everything professionally to take care of Jack. And as I'm doing that, I also experience kind of from afar a pandemic, right? Because as you guys know, COVID changed everything, and we'll talk about it for the rest of our lives. But that's really what I mean by life had other plans. Thankfully, Jack is so healthy, and the love of our life that we waited for a long time for, that little scrunchy nose. If you can't be obsessed with that, I don't know what else you can be obsessed with. But so after 2 years of experience from afar, how the results of a pandemic were having on my business colleagues that still were working, as well as parallel getting Jack in a spot where he could get back on track with growing and being healthy and eating. I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do, and I wanted to open up a company, but just me. I didn't want a co-founder. I didn't want an investor. I didn't want anyone telling me what to do. And so 2 years is a long time to think about something, and that was when I was really confident that I needed to open up Hire Integrated. So that's what I did. Got together. When you have worked and been a leader and hired and trained recruiters, you kind of know who you want to bring together. So I called people that I wanted to work with, and I told them I was launching. And it was kind of that first year where it's like, is this real? Every day I was like, is this real? I don't know why, but it was just a really fun first year for us, in the sense of we were growing month over month. We opened January 2021 is when we opened, and we hit $1 million in revenue that like August, September. And I shut down the whole company, and we all went to Nordstrom's, and we bought tons and tons and tons of gifts, and we had them wrapped, and we took and we delivered them to all of our clients across the valley. And we just wrote them a little note, and we said, we're celebrating our first milestone of $1 million in revenue. We have a lot more milestones ahead, but we know we're only going to get there because of you. And thank you for trusting us in a small new business the first year. And that was a really good day, just to kind of be reflective and celebrate with our clients and our team. So, a little bit about Hire Integrated, because it's my baby, my other baby, is, when people are looking for a job, there's usually a lot of vulnerabilities that come with that. And either they were unexpectedly let go, or they were terminated in some situations, or maybe they're not looking for a job, but they're so busy working their current job that they don't realize that there's maybe something bigger available for them today. And so the whole premise of Hire Integrated is that we really try to have hospitality in our approach. We want people to be seen. My biggest pet peeve when it comes to recruiting is a recruiter feeling like they know a job seeker better than a job seeker knows themselves. And they don't. They're there to listen. They're there to advocate. They're there to really kind of find out what it is that makes this person passionate. Because if a person is doing something that they're really passionate about, they're going to do a much better job than doing something that they feel like they were tricked into or they don't want to be doing. And that's where we feel like there's the higher kind of selection of helping people find jobs is really understanding what they want to do and seeing if those align with the opportunities we have. So hospitality is kind of at the core of who Hire Integrated is, and that's who I make my hiring decisions based off of. I had an opportunity to speak to Utah Business, and they published an article, and here's a quote that they did, which is much more elegant when you're writing than you can present. But they were kind of getting along the premise of if I was scared about AI taking over my job. That's like the most trendy question to ask right now. And I'm like, heck no. I was like, I don't have to take notes when I'm interviewing candidates anymore. My summaries that I'm providing to my hiring managers are like 3 pages when they used to be like a paragraph. Like, we're able to communicate so much more about a candidate and why we're passionate about a candidate to a hiring manager because of AI. And this is kind of a quote I sent them to support that, in the way that beneath all of those keywords lies an individual, their stories, their ambitions, and their potential. And I can truly say, as a business owner right now, I want to hire someone that cares about my company. I want to hire someone that cares and wants to be there. And if they make mistakes or they don't check every single box on their resume, but they're willing to learn and they're willing to bring ideas and be creative, you better believe I would rather hire them versus an applicant that looks perfect on paper. And that's where we've been successful in placing, like I said, thousands of candidates throughout my career. Sorry, Wes, I keep clicking at that screen. So we're not Utah's largest recruiting agency. We're not, we're Utah's brightest recruiting agency. Hopefully you appreciate that from a marketing standpoint.
Absolutely, I love that. Perfect, differentiation. Right?
And it gives us opportunities to wear pink and other things when we go to places. So I didn't want to ramble too long. I'm very casual. I'll talk as much as you want. And I know we have a solid hour, but I did want to make sure I understand what you guys are looking for today and answer questions, and I can help you find a job, or I can tell you who's hiring, or anything you want to know. So if I don't know, I'll either make it up or tell you I don't know. How's that? Is that okay if I open it up to questions?
Yeah, great.
Anyone in here looking for a job? Okay.
I run a toxin-free cleaning business and have for 2 years now, and I wonder what you think would be a really good way to outreach to people, whether that's cold calling, which I've done. I feel like I've done a lot of the outreach, but I just am wondering any suggestions that you might have.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to internalize that question about, I was really fortunate because I was employed by Robert Half, and it was kind of on their dime that I got to build up my clientele, right? They were paying me to cold call and get to know and develop relationships with hiring managers. And that foundation was critical for the success, more than 15 years later for Hire Integrated, because I still had relationships with those hiring managers. And when you're placing people and they get promoted, they turn into hiring managers. So it's kind of this cycle where, I still have to cold call. Don't let me fool you by any stretch of imagination. But a very, important milestone of why Hire Integrated has been successful is because I was able to build my Rolodex and solidify my relationships underneath being employed with another organization, because you get to take those relationships with you.
Absolutely, yeah, it's definitely about who you know,
Yeah.
for sure.
So that was critical for me, was just making sure I had the contact. So when I announced Hire Integrated, it was, oh, well, we worked with you before. We're excited to support you and work with you again. And it made it, a critical element for being able to grow and continue to grow. So I don't know if you want to take one of those strips, but take it as you will. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you already have those contacts. I'm just curious as to what you think would be the best way to get in contact with those people coming from a place of no resources, like where you don't have any connections. What would be the best outsource to start getting some connections?
Start getting connections. I mean, every time I take a personality assessment, connector is like number one, right? Connector in any shape, form, or fashion for my background. And so in a lot of settings, I naturally gravitate towards trying to make a meaningful connection. It's just very much so my DNA. And so I'm the type of person where if I go to a networking event or, Utah business social event or a luncheon or I volunteer, I'm on the board of the Boulder Way Forward, an American Heart Association. I will form connections, very meaningful connections. It's common for me to go into an event and then afterwards I'll come back and I'll send an email, I really enjoyed meeting you. Like, thank you for sharing X, Y, and Z with me. Like, here's my number. Like, I want to really stay in touch with you. And, and that's kind of a foundation of trying to not only just enjoy talking to someone, but then open up the door to continuing staying in touch with that person. And so anytime there's a lot of people, find your people, talk to them. I have to remind myself, even today, every time I go into a social setting, people hate networking. They hate being there. They don't want to be the first one to say hi. So I try to make it really easy for them. I'll just go up, and as long as they're not talking to someone else, and those are my favorite people, introduce myself, talk to them, find out about them. And because I genuinely love hearing people's stories, and that's my profession, is to tell people stories, to really a natural thing. So hopefully that helps with making those connections.
Sure.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yes.
What are some of your favorite stories?
My favorite stories about helping people find jobs, maybe.
About your clients that you connected with places.
My very favorite story is I was just launching, I was in Tennessee launching the office. And we had a client that needed to hire someone in payroll. So I was just talking to payroll candidates, in-person interviews. And I had a payroll candidate come in. I asked her, why did you choose a career in payroll? Do you like it? Kind of just trying to understand if she was passionate about it or if this was just, whatever. She told me that she grew up in a household where it was paycheck to paycheck. And her dad didn't speak English very well, and he worked at a manufacturing firm. And every week that she would come home with that paycheck, it was a different amount. And they knew it was wrong. And the whole family would just be in disarray because the unpredictability of this paycheck was just so not reliant. And she, as, rather young child at the time, really started understanding payroll so that she could help her dad go in every single week and advocate to that person that did just a shitty job on payroll, to be really candid with you, and didn't take it serious, and advocate for him and his pay, and his earnings so that he could be paid the right amount. And that was kind of her awakening and why she protected the ability to make sure that everybody's paycheck was always correct. And I was like, well, you just got hired. So I was like, yeah, like she's anyone that has that type of story, like I want her to run the payroll world, you know? Probably one of my very favorite stories. On helping someone.
Question, for those of us that may not be familiar with your industry and what a firm like yours does, can you tell us a little bit about what companies do, the day-to-day, what your role is, just kind of more a broad kind of underlying foundation about your company?
Yeah. If you're like me, back when I graduated, I had no idea what a recruiter was, clearly. So companies will hire integrated to help them hire on their behalf. So it's either because they don't have a recruiting department, or maybe their recruiting department is maxed out, or it's a very, very specialized search, which is usually the situation. They need like a lot of TLC on that search. So we get engaged for companies to hire on their behalf. So a lot of times when my team and I go to market with positions, we will only get in touch with candidates and engage them based off of the openings we have at the time. And you better believe when someone's paying your company tens of thousands of dollars to hire that person, they want everything. They want the skills, they want the passion, they want the engagement. And so really during our screening process, what we're doing is we're taking this funnel. And a lot of times our funnel is best identified through our outreach efforts. So we are reaching out to people that usually are either gainfully employed, they're currently doing that job today, and we'll go through all the screenings of those applicants, and we'll select our top 3 to 5 candidates to the hiring manager. And then from there, they'll make a selection, hire, and then they pay us a fee. We actually don't work for job seekers. That's the biggest misconception on a recruiting agency. Yes.
What traits are you looking for again?
What traits? It's a really good question. Our traits are completely dependent upon the jobs that we're hiring for at the time.
I understand. You just mentioned 3 of them, and I just want to write them down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misspoke.
You're
But yeah, I mean, skills, right? Like making sure that this skill selection lines up from the resume versus what they have. A lot of our jobs, there is an education requirement. And the engagement. Engagement is actually so much bigger of a deal. I can get a person based off of their engagement and their desire and ability to want to do the job, even if they're missing some of those other elements, such as maybe a degree, depending on the position, and the skills. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Good. Yes.
So just so I'm kind of understanding this a little better, do you guys like keep certain resumes on file for like future use, or and then for other job searches, do you just like go to LinkedIn or something and just try and find people and connect with them, or
Really.
kind of what's that process to find people?
Yeah, really good question. So we do have a database of resumes. It's called, an applicant tracking system, an ATS is what we call it in our industry. And anytime anyone applies for a job, that goes into our ATS. And so when we open up a new position, we'll put it in there, and our applicant tracking system will say, here's all the candidates already in your database that are a match for this position. The thing that's really challenging about that is sometimes those candidates applied years ago, right? And where they're at now and their updated resume or their ability to want to talk about an open job traditionally is not as fruitful for us going through our existing applicant tracking system. So usually 9 out of 10 times, every time we get a new open position from a company that wants us to hire for them, we're taking that new position to market. And LinkedIn is probably where we get the majority of our candidates. Even if they don't come directly from LinkedIn, it's usually a referral from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is critical in helping a recruiter find you for your job. Critical. I could do a whole lesson, part 10, on LinkedIn.
We actually talked about that at the very end of the semester. Have someone from the Career Center come in and talk about how to create a good LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile.
Yeah, a picture, you know, we love a good picture, making sure that if you don't have a lot of experiences, that you are kind of capitalizing on your opportunities of where you volunteer, classes that you succeeded in, opportunities where you organize something on campus. Those are all things that a recruiter's looking for outside of just that experience bracket. But yeah, no, we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I actually get a lot of business on LinkedIn.
So you had mentioned that you had tried to start a company. This is before the Hire Integrated, and I just want to hear more about the challenges with that and why it didn't work out, and
Yeah.
also why you chose to start Hire Integrated by yourself versus with another person like you did before.
Yeah. Do you want the real answer?
I do.
Okay. So, I loved working at Robert Half International. I loved it. And that was my first job. And it was crazy because when I was interviewing for jobs, I had found the Robert Half, recruiter. And I was like, well, before I take the job from Robert Half, I'll interview with other recruiting firms. And all the other recruiting firms in town said, you don't want to work for Robert Half. And I was like, why? And they're like, oh, it's a turn and burn organization. And it is. I mean, hundreds of people kind of came and went when I was there in that time, because don't let me kid you, recruiting, especially when you're full desk, which means you're responsible for interviewing the candidate and you're responsible for having jobs to place that candidate in. So that's a kind of a full desk type of recruiting environment. It is sales. It is a sales position. And in any sales organization, there is just high turnover, because if you're not hitting those metrics, it's very calculated decision to terminate you. And that made me want to work at Robert Half even more. The fact that other people were telling me that I couldn't do it because it was such high turnover. But I was like, it's a Fortune 500 company. If I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. And that was kind of my reason for saying yes and going forward with Robert Half International. So a lot of people would have said I was crazy to leave my career at Robert Half, because I had been there 5-6 years. I had built up a great book of business. And at that point, it was just a matter of coming in and picking up the phone, per what they say when you build your book of business, right? And like I said, I'd worked up to 6 figures. I was young. And why would I leave that to start over? I just wanted to see if I could do it. I had nothing to lose kind of mentality. And that's kind of a theme you'll find in my career is been there, done that. I have a lot of security. I felt like the bills were paid off and I didn't have a lot of risk. I just had upside. And if I fell flat on my face, at least I can say I tried. And so that gave me the weird reason to leave all of that and go and work with an investor and a co-founder. And we were funded by a private equity team. Man, when you are funded by private equity and investors and you have a co-founder, you spend so much time talking to them and making them feel confident in their decision to select you and to invest you and to continue to invest in you. It's a lot of calibration. It's like a marriage, except so much worse because you are just always having that continual calibration, particularly when you're funded by private equity. And I learned a lot. Don't get me wrong. I learned a ton. I learned I needed to kind of promote and take credit for my efforts and my contributions in a way where I can continue to earn the confidence of investors and those that were supporting this entrepreneur journey. It was a great takeaway. And for that was the reason why it was supposed to happen. But I was on a plane every single week and I was always trying to give these folks confidence. And it kind of drove me crazy because there was another person that would just tell them anything they wanted to hear. And I was like critical. If I told them that this was my Q4 projection, I was going to hit it plus some, right? And so I was a realist and didn't have as much pizzazz with the presentation at the time. So the opportunity where we were going to acquire the regional firm fell through. And I had developed a really good friendship with the founder. And so I sold out of my equity and went to a regional structure that wasn't traveling, a little bit more centralized. And it was great. When I joined, it was a local firm called Prince Carlson. When I joined, they were in the single digits. You know, they're a private company, so I want to respect their finances, and it's recorded. They were single digits in revenue, right? Like that $5 to $10 million annual revenue mark. And you know, while I was there, we tripled it. It was an incredible growth, you know, journey of really taking off. And that gave me the confidence to go out on my own, knowing I could impact change for a firm that had been around for 25 years and not having to calibrate, you know, a business partner every minute of the day, and just go out and actually do it. High level of execution, and you don't have to collaborate as much with a business partner and investor if you're the only one that has put money into it. I set aside $30,000 to open up Higher Integrated. And I spent on my logo, which I loved, I worked with a marketing firm, and that took up like $5,000 of my budget. And then I think I ended up spending, I don't remember the exact numbers. My husband went through for the article and validated them, but it was less than 15 grand that I ended up spending before we got to our break even, and then paid it back and then into revenue mode. So that's the other great thing about recruiting, is it's a very low, you know, barriers of entry, very low startup costs, because your product is selling people that are typically already open to looking for a job. You're just making that a better, easier experience for them. That was a really long answer, but
Thank you. Yeah, that's
if you ever decide to go into business with a business partner, my advice there is that so many times business partners focus on, you know, starting out and the engagement and the operating agreement and the equity and just everything as far as like entering the relationship. You have to have the conversation with your future business partners about, what if there's an exit? What does it look like? And that needs to be really predetermined before you go into business with a business partner. I mean, it's got to be higher than divorce rates, business partners, because of just how difficult it is to stay aligned and grow and scale with that individual through the journey of the business. It's true. I believe you. Anyone have any other questions on Higher Integrated or recruiting or finding a job? Yes.
So with recruiting, you help people get a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that income come in for you? Like, how do you gain money off of that?
Yeah, really good question. The companies that hire us pay us to find candidates. So traditionally, it's based off of their salary. So I'll just do really easy math. Let's say that we have a accounting manager position, and the salary for that position is $100,000. Our market standard across all recruiting agencies is typically about 25%. So 25%, we find that accounting manager based off of their projected total income. That would be a $25,000 fee that company would pay the Higher Integrated. So 20 to 25% based off of total compensation, and the job seeker, the person we place, does not pay a thing.
Okay.
And if they ever try to get you to pay a thing, run, because I actually think it's illegal.
I have a question related to that. So say that your company is hired to find a candidate that's very unique and specialized.
And typically that's the case.
Would the fee differ depending on the company,
Yeah.
type of position?
Yeah, there's two models. There's kind of the contingency model, which is we don't get paid until we find the person, they accept, and they start working day one. That's when we bill for our fee. And that's contingency. So a lot of times when someone's working with a contingency recruiter, they can still take referrals and they can accept candidates through other sources on the contingency model. For a very, very specialized position, we'll do a retainer model, which is they have to pay us a retainer to even engage in that search. And that can be as high as 35%. And that's what we'll see on our executive searches. So 35% total income. Sometimes, our total comp on those can be anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 plus relocation. And there's very few of those people. So we work on those months and months. We've never done doctor recruiting, but it's much more of a quantity over a quantity type of play when you're engaged in that extensive of a search. Usually something like that's going to take a full-time recruiter, a full-time project manager, and a full-time research assistant, 40 hours a week, 3 people, anywhere from 3 to 6 months to really successfully get some type of retained search like that over the line. So it sounds like a lot when you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees, but you can imagine how that gets eat up on those things. Still turn a profit. Anyone in here thinking about, I know you're doing your journey, but any people that are thinking that they're gonna start up a business or have started up a business, any entrepreneurs in the room? Yeah, tell me about it.
So I think if I were to start up a business, it would be sustainable. And so I did go to the University of Utah, and my professor would always kind of engage the metaverse on us and how digital garments are a lot more useful now. So I think if I were to go into like graphic design or anything like that, I think it'd be cool to start up on the metaverse or even just have some garments on there and like build a website off of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You're going to care a lot about being found, right? And the ease of being able to kind of purchase. Did you say that you were going to do the entrepreneur journey or have?
That's the goal, but I feel like my place in it is not, I feel like we need other people that will do the broader aspect of it, whereas I probably will play a minor role. The more I hear about it, the more I'm like, no, we need so much more.
As far as
So it's importing goods from another country. We have familial ties in Africa. And they've already kind of began the journey, but I don't understand a lot of that. So that's what I'm working for. But then ultimately it would just be to run our own business, importing cashews and possibly some other avocados. They're seasonal, but yeah, different things like that.
Well, the consumer product good market in Utah is just taking off. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to, mix hers and just ingredients, and you've got some incredible, and both of those are female powerhouse owned companies that are just hitting the consumer product good market here aggressively. Should really follow the Mix Her story. It's been incredible. I'm really happy for them. Well, I am coming up a little bit short on time, and I do apologize.
Oh, no.
I'm usually quite the talker. Oh yes, I'm sorry.
You said that recruitment is like a very big turnover career, so what do
Yeah.
you think like recruitment agencies look for when they hire recruiters, and you specifically like what education and stuff are you looking for?
Yeah, really good question. It depends on the recruiting agency. So there's recruiting agencies that will separate sales from recruitment. And then there's recruiting agencies that expect for you to do interviewing and placement of the candidate, as well as having the ability to bring in the jobs from the hiring companies, which is the really hard part of recruiting, right? Because you can interview anybody all day long, but if you don't have a job to send them on, it's really wasting their time and your time. And so convincing a hiring manager to pay you money to recruit for them is much more challenging, and it's a very traditional sales type of role in that sense. So if you want that traditional just recruiting position, a lot of times you can go either in-house, like underneath like an HR assistant, and you'll start to have some exposure to recruiting, and it allows you to really kind of evolve into a recruiting position, even in-house with a company. So you're dedicated to that company and telling their stories, and you don't have to go out and do sales for all of these companies that ask to get their trust to hire for them, because those positions are already there and they want you to find them. You're an internal recruiter. Just a basic certificate in HR, like through the SHRM Society, is going to allow you to get interviews for an HR assistant position rather quickly. And they're always willing to kind of promote as long as you continue to get HR certifications. Without a degree in HR, you really will not ever be able to manage an HR team. And so that's going to be more of a general HR career. And besides just recruiting, you'll have other things to deal in within the HR community. But in-house, there's director of talent acquisitions. And again, there are certifications for that. On the agency side, anything that has shown some type of sales, they'll take people that have been missionaries, that have gone out and sold pest control, anything where you're not scared of being told no, and you've been told no a lot, and you're comfortable with being told no, and you understand and don't mind overcoming objections. That's going to be more of the gateway into a sales opportunity. And I definitely leaned more heavy on the sales side in my career than I did the HR side in my career, even though I had a business degree. Hopefully that answers your question on that. Final call?
Well, I have a question. Oh, if no one else wants.
No.
But you just mentioned, or at the beginning, you said that sometimes recruiters or hiring managers will focus less on, maybe you don't meet the degree requirement or you have less experience than they're looking for if the candidate is willing to learn, enthusiastic. But that's, how do you get through the barriers to that? Because you send your resume, it's going through a digital, you're checking that, and your education is not there. How do you move to the next step?
Yeah, I mean, really, when it comes to looking for a job, the goal is to stand out and to have a meaningful connection. Like, that's your goal, right? You're in a very crowded space. There's a lot of people applying for jobs. You'll go into a black hole when you send your resume in. All of those things are true. If I were looking for a job today, and instead of course, I'll play the game, I'll apply to jobs because it's a numbers game, and my resume will go into a black hole. But I'm going to get in, I'm going to connect with, I'm going to find out that company, I'm going to connect with a hiring manager online, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm Emily. I just applied for this position. I know you have a lot of applications, but here are some things that make me really special. And I would love the opportunity to tell you more about it in person, right? I'm going to send them a message like that. I guarantee you a lot of those applicants are not doing that. Let's say they still didn't reach out to you, right? And you're like, well, dang it, I really wanted that job. I think I would be really good for it. I'm really passionate about it. Something about this job really speaks to me. I'm going to call them up. I'm going to call the receptionist and be like, hey, transfer me over to Whitney. Whitney, I know this is really persistent. I applied. I also sent you a LinkedIn. I know those things get lost in the shuffle, especially when you're hiring, and I manage that you're understaffed. But I really want this position. There are a lot of things that are described on your website that culturally align with what I'm looking for right now. I would love to come in and talk with you. Hiring managers want people to make it easy for them to hire. And if that hiring manager still says no, I probably don't want to work for that hiring manager, right? And then when I go in and I interview, interviews are really stressful and people don't like interviewing. Here's the secret about interviewing. Hiring managers don't like conducting interviews. A lot of times they're stressed out, they're way behind on their work, and they'd rather stay behind their desk and get a lot of things done besides, breaking time off to conduct that interview. So that's where you have to make that meaningful connection. And it's really kind of basic communication one-on-one. It's looking them in the eye, it's saying their name, it's thanking them for their time. If you don't know something and you feel like you completely bombed, just be like, Whitney, my head is blank. I know this stuff, but I'm not able to articulate it right now. And it's probably because this is an interview and I'm intimidated and I didn't sleep much last night. So can I come back to that one, or let me think for a minute? That relatability of when things go really south can actually really help too in an interview. But you can just remember some of those things to help yourself stand out and make a meaningful connection. I think you're going to increase your chances if or when you ever have to look for a job.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for allowing me to come out and speak with you guys, and good luck in your journeys out here, and best of luck in getting the job that you want or the one you want to create.